Welcome to Conversations Different, the podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican, focusing on the interesting people, places, and issues of northern New Mexico. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and today we feature Susannah Walden. She is Kabul bureau chief for Agence France-Presse, a wire service out of France that covers the globe. But before Susannah became a foreign correspondent, she was a young woman growing up in Santa Fe. Welcome, Susannah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're home on a visit to your parents who still live in Santa Fe.
Yes, that's correct. I'm very grateful that they still live here, so I get to still come back home to Santa Fe when I'm on a break.
But Kabul obviously is a long way from Santa Fe. How the heck did you get there?
Do you mean physically this time, or the whole long story of how I ended up in Afghanistan?
The long story. I'm thinking you took a plane or maybe you swam.
Yeah, well, from one landlocked country to a landlocked state.
Yes.
It's a long trip, but it's the nice thing about Afghanistan is, or one of the nice things about Afghanistan is that actually, landscape-wise, there's some things that are familiar to New Mexico. So I feel at home there in that sense of just looking at the mountains around us. But it also makes me homesick for the mountains here that I grew up around.
That's right. And they probably don't have green chili.
No, unless I bring it, which I do. They don't necessarily know how to make a good Christmas chili sauce, but
that's right. Yeah, we were told. I have a friend whose husband was a National Guardsman who I think he went to Iraq, not Afghanistan, but some of the training for soldiers that were going to go to the Middle East happened in the hills around Santa Fe.
Yeah,
because
really?
the landscape was similar.
Yeah, no, definitely, I can see that. The mountains really do have the same kind of feel, the same kind of look. So I could see how that would work out well.
Yeah. So before we started, we were talking, and you moved here when you were 4 years old, went to school. How did you end up? What do you remember of your early years in Santa Fe?
Oh man. The first thing that comes to mind is the sky and just the landscape and how you feel like you can see for miles. And honestly, there aren't a lot of places. Been really lucky to see a lot of the world now. There's still a lot more to see and to call a few places home, but there's nowhere else that I've been that really has that feeling that Santa Fe and New Mexico does, where you just feel like the sky is so enormous and but a little bit closer to the ground of things that I remember growing up. I lived out in Arroyo Hondo and El Dorado and Las Campanas and a lot of different parts of Santa Fe. And I remember going riding as a kid and green chili and also remembering or realizing, I guess, when I did leave for high school later on of how special and how different New Mexico was, that we have a lot of things here that you really are unique in the United States. And I still really treasure that, to be honest.
I remember when I was a young reporter, I got to interview Fran Lebowitz, who was a New York humorist, satirist, and she talked about America going into Pizza Hut-like blandness. And I told her, well, I'm from New Mexico, and if you went there, it is not like the rest of the United States. And it's still, we are more similar than we probably were when I was a little girl in Las Vegas. But I definitely think we're still different. And I treasure that as well, because you want your home and your place to be unique.
Yeah. And, it's something that is so nice that creates I don't often get the opportunity to meet New Mexicans out in the far-flung parts of the world, but I do have a New Mexican friend who lives in Pakistan right now, and I didn't know she was there, and I stumbled upon her in Lahore, and it's just being able to share those things that really you can't share with anyone else unless they've been to this part of the world or were lucky enough to grow up here.
No, that's true. And one of the things people do is they get a Zia tattoo when they go out, or at least wear stickers, and that you can catch them. I met a guy on the roof of that tall building in Chicago, whichever one it was, and they were wearing a Zia. And I was like, wait, you're from New Mexico. And it turned out I knew their cousin in Taos. So we were like, yeah.
I was thinking on the way over here that I still have my New Mexico driver's license and my New Mexico phone number, but I don't yet have a Zia tattoo. So I'm wondering if I should add that to the collection of...
If nothing else, you can just get like stickers for your bags.
Yeah, exactly.
And that'll, lend to conversation.
Yeah, no, it really does. I mean, honestly, telling people I'm from New Mexico is usually gets a sort of reaction, because you don't you're not enough of us out in the world right now, I think.
When I was editor of my college paper, it was around the time of the hostages and Jimmy Carter and real angst between the Middle East and us, the United States. And a lot of Arab students and other Middle Easterners went to Texas Tech because there was something called the International Center for the Study of Arid and Semi-Arid Lands. And they're all there. And they used to like to come to the paper to yell at me about all the things America did wrong. And one of the things they always said is, you people put your old people in nursing homes. All you do is get divorced. And I was always saying, I'm from New Mexico. We may have divorces, but we live in extended families. And then we'd get into these discussions about how we weren't as horrible, and their stereotype of the United States was just as bad as our stereotype of, how they lived. Mm. And I wonder, when you go to a place that's so different from where you grew up and what you know, how do you see past your own stereotypes to start telling the stories that are really there?
I think that's a really good question. And I don't know. I think that's also sort of at the core as to why I do this job at all, is because I wanted to meet people where they were at and where they were coming from, and not bring my own background or my stereotypes into the story. Also, sort of early on, I was really interested in languages and other cultures and other places. And, obviously I studied Spanish growing up here, but then I started studying French too fairly early on, which is part of how I ended up working for Agence France-Presse. But I think there was always this interest for me to just see how other people saw the world, and not bring my own judgments into it until I heard what they had to say. And that's something that I really love about journalism, is being able to sit in front of someone and ask them to tell their story. And if we're lucky enough, they open up and they're honest, and we can meet them on common ground. Obviously, a lot of journalism too is holding people to account and asking tough questions. But I think too, the desire for me to do some more foreign journalism was to be able to really see where we had things in common and meet people from all different places and all different backgrounds. And I'm lucky enough to have been able to do that.
Yeah. I think one of the advantages of growing up in New Mexico is that when you go out to the bigger United States, you're already an other, because our world is a little bit different. And I know when I went to graduate school in D.C., I had a lot of things to adjust to and to explain. And Simon Romero, who works for the New York Times, who's a West Las Vegas high school graduate, he says, I was the other and here I am. And now he goes as the United States person to Mexico or Brazil or all the places he's been. And he has that advantage because he was in New Mexico and then had to adjust to Harvard.
Yeah. I definitely had that experience of, going to the Northeast for high school, of feeling like, okay, this is really different from where I grew up. And even though that's my dad was from the Northeast, it was so familiar in some ways. I had that experience definitely of feeling like another. And then I guess as uncomfortable as feeling like an other can be, I also found it really helpful in just sort of stripping back those stories that I tell about myself or that we have about ourselves, and really going back to the basics. And I found I actually really liked that feeling. And so each time I've moved around a lot, which has its pluses and its minuses for sure. But I went to France when I was a teenager, and then I went to Britain for university. And each time I again had to kind of start over. And there's some a lot of challenges to that, but I think I was always drawn to, once again, having that feeling of like, okay, how do I challenge myself in a new place, and stripping back those sort of trappings of a life that we can build around ourselves.
Yeah. You get really comfortable with yourself, I think, if you can adjust. Yeah. If you can't adjust, it's harder. But once you can go to a new place and work it out, it does a lot for your self-esteem and just for your sense of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And for, my confidence in myself of being able to adapt and adjust and find my way around new environments. But that being said, I'm still definitely nervous every time I show up in a new place, and I just got to figure out how to get from the airport to wherever I'm going, and definitely if it's a new language. And yeah, the downsides certainly are that you don't get to have that stability and don't get to be near your friends and family as much, but you do get to build relationships and friendships all over the world. So yeah.
That's right.
Pluses and minuses.
Yes, that's sort of the balance of life, isn't it? On that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with Conversations Different.
Are you dreaming of a home of your own in Santa Fe, but feel like your finances aren't where they need to be? HomeWise is here to help. We offer free financial coaching and classes in English and Spanish that will help you proactively manage your money and get you qualified for the best mortgage loan possible. Contact us today to register for an in-person or online class, or to speak with a home purchase advisor who you can work with one-on-one to help you increase your savings, reduce your debt, and improve your credit score. Call 505-983-9473 or visit us at homewise.org. Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 188231.
We are back with Conversations Different, talking to Susannah about her experiences abroad as a foreign correspondent. Now, so you go to college in Scotland, you're in Edinburgh, and what led you from there to the world?
I mean, Scotland was sort of a first big leap, although I'd spent a year in France when I was a teenager, and that kind of pushed me to think about going to university in outside of the States. And but to be honest, I had never been to Scotland. I'd spent a couple days in London, but I didn't really know exactly what I was getting into, and so diving into that was a really big first experience of finding my own way, and
they talk really funny, so I think they're hard to understand. It's like sometimes like if you're listening to a foreign language and you don't understand it, you're like, okay, that's a foreign language, but they speak English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's like, woo.
Yeah. I mean, I like in Edinburgh, it was. The Scottish accent is very lovely and mellow. But yeah, I didn't struggle too much with that, but I've always been really into studying languages anyway, so I had gone straight into trying out Arabic and then dabbling in Russian, and then, at university I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and had some chaotic years of trying to figure that out, and I landed on Persian. And I studied philosophy and politics as well, but my degree is in Persian and philosophy.
Oh, wow.
Which I always sort of laugh because it's a pretty uncommon degree to have.
It's a nice combination.
Yeah, but It also was a strange choice of mine because obviously Persian is spoken in Iran as Farsi, in Afghanistan, Dari, and Tajikistan as Tajik. And I really wanted to go to Iran, and I just became really fascinated with a place that I didn't know anything about. And I also found that in America there are obviously a lot of Iranian Americans, but I didn't come across a lot of them when I was younger. And so a lot of people in the States didn't necessarily that I knew didn't have a lot of knowledge of that part of the world, and
we didn't like at that point. There was a big
a lot of conflict and a lot of and so I got really interested in it, and I also really got into Persian poetry because they have an incredible history of poetry. But I've only got an American passport, and I picked one of the one of the places in the world that is really hard to go to as an American. And so I've never been.
Wow.
And so I put a lot of time into studying the language, and it was very useful when I moved to the Middle East eventually. And I was living in Lebanon, and when I started working with AFP, having some Farsi language skills were obviously very helpful. But I was always asking myself of when am I gonna use this language? Like properly
all this
in my
years
work.
of study, yeah.
Yeah, and that's been a really great thing about working in Afghanistan is having the language makes a really big difference. But to your original question, I think it's hard to pinpoint a moment when I really felt like I wanted to see a lot of the world and try to get out into the world. But I think my parents had a lot to do with that as well. My father's a musician, and he's traveled all over the world as a musician. And so he was always, when I was a kid, was always coming back with, something from Alaska or something from, a lot of it was in the States, but sometimes he would go further afield. And so I think in our household too, there were the stories of places that they'd been and these places that my dad was going for music. And so I'm sure that just
kind of stuck in your head.
Yeah. And I think also the important thing about it too is that I knew it was possible.
I was just going to say.
Yeah. That it was, given the right circumstances and obviously, it's, as I said before, pluses and minuses. Like it's, if you don't have your feet planted on the ground, then there's some things you lose. But yeah, I think it was really valuable for me to have some examples of that was something I could do.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting trade-off because I know in my 20s, I traveled all over the United States. I didn't go anywhere exciting, but I worked at papers.
The United States is still exciting.
Yeah, well,
it's a big place.
I was in San Angelo, Texas, and Bradenton, Florida. It was interesting, but because it was really different from New Mexico. But I missed all the things that everyone, like, my cousin's weddings or births, all that stuff. So I was happy to come back to New Mexico where everybody is. But I also am happy that I saw, how other people do it, because there's something, even if you come home eventually or make a home wherever you're going to stop, you have this experience of other cultures and other ideas. And it's so helpful. And I bet you bring a lot of that to your reporting.
Yeah, I think, I hope so. I definitely hope so. I think, it does help in reporting, especially going to new places, because there is tension around, of course, of how valuable is it to have somebody who is not from a place going there to report on it. And I still think that there is value in that, depending on the context. Sometimes you really should have somebody who is from the context of the place. But yeah, I like to think that coming into a new place with outside perspectives and from a lot of different perspectives can help with my approach to the story and how I see a story, and also stories that are coming back to the States. Yeah.
When did you get to Afghanistan?
I've been there for, I guess I arrived in a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Or it'll be,
Was that after the Americans pulled out? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you basically see the fallout and the tumult from all the way we left.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's has really been a defining factor of my time there, because it's a huge upheaval and a big change for the whole country. Yeah. And a big challenge for a lot of people. And
what is it like reporting as a woman in a country, now where little girls can't even go to school?
As a foreign woman, it's different for me than it is for Afghan women. I obviously have a lot of privilege as a foreign woman, but I'm also one of few international reporters who is still based there. The media landscape has changed a lot, and there are very few international media that still have offices there, and then even fewer who have got foreign reporters who are based there all the time. Obviously, I leave every few months, but yeah, I think, for me, there are challenges, but I'm usually thinking about the sort of safety and ease of work for my team more than, well, that's what I try to focus on more than my own difficulties, because I know that for me it's a lot easier.
Do you have to cover your head and go out and do all that kind of thing?
Yeah, the law is you've got to. I mean, let's be clear. Before the Taliban, it's a pretty conservative society. It's also it's vast majority Muslim, and so it would have been very normal for me to wear hijab, to wear a scarf,
right?
And
just out of
dress
respect,
very modestly anyway. And now it's just that's the rule, and I wear a veil and cover like a full length cover and a
okay,
abaya
so
usually.
Is that the burqa? Do you wear that or just
no,
just the cover? Okay,
yeah,
for your head.
I wear a veil and an abaya.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't
go all the way.
Well, and also we're not required to.
Okay.
It's, the law is for women to be covered fully, but we're not required to wear a burqa.
Right, that makes sense. Now, it'd be if you had brown eyes, you could go undercover almost because they wouldn't tell if you're a Westerner. But it's hard because you're got blue. They're going to see it.
I think even then it would be pretty difficult because I'm also quite tall, and I think there's just a lot in how I move through the world that, my Afghan colleagues tell me that even if I was, you couldn't see my blue eyes. But I mean, that being said, there are a lot of Afghans that have
blue eyes,
green eyes.
I guess that picture
red hair
from National Geographic, that little girl did too. That's right.
Yeah, it's a very diverse, like in a lot of ways more diverse than I think maybe people are aware of or realize. But yeah.
When Ray Rivera went undercover or crossed the border into Afghanistan, he's our former editor and was at the New York Times at the time. He basically said it helped because he looked like them.
Yeah.
And that was a real interesting experience for him because it was, I forget what kind of war was going on, but he goes in and they didn't recognize him. He just looked like another brown person, So.
Yeah, I think I won't be able to do that in Afghanistan, but I do speak Dari, but it's not so good that I can that I could get away with. I still make plenty of mistakes, and my accent isn't perfect, so I'd have to. Yeah.
But it must be so helpful because I'm sure you have a translator still or someone helping you. But if that person maybe isn't translating correctly, you know enough to know what's being said.
Yeah. I mean, I've never run into an issue where my colleagues are translating incorrectly, but it definitely, I think one of the things I've always found incredibly valuable about learning other languages is just indicating to the people that I'm living with and I'm working with and or countries that I'm visiting that I have made an effort and that I've learned a bit more about the place that I'm coming to. And so I've, other than being a bit of a language nerd, which helps, but a lot of people are very surprised because...
No, Americans don't tend to do that. We talk loud.
Yeah, I mean... I get a little defensive with when people are like, "Oh, you're American and you speak French and you speak Dari," and I'm like, well, there are a lot of Americans too who grew up speaking tons of different languages, but yeah, the stereotype definitely is that like we don't do that. But I mean, New Mexico is a really bilingual place or multilingual place, a lot more than bilingual. But yeah, and I'm working on my Spanish again because I've let it atrophy for way too long. But when I come home, I feel like gotta practice.
Yep, that makes sense. On that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We are back with Conversations Different. I want to get a little personal in that I wonder, every reporter grows up dreaming of becoming a foreign correspondent. We saw, Year of Living Dangerously or any of the movies where people are out there covering, action and war. And I imagine the reality is probably not difficult, but it must be a challenge. And I just wonder what your daily life is like. I mean, do you have an office that you go to? Do you work from your house? And do you walk down the street to go to work? How does it work?
Well, in Afghanistan, I live in a compound where we have our office and our living quarters in the same place, which is pretty common in the country. And for foreign media, that's kind of the setup.
Right. And there's not a bar that you can go to probably because they don't serve alcohol. But I mean, that's what I think of when I think of foreign correspondent is the bar in Vietnam, Hanoi.
Yeah, but I think probably the experience of people who were reporting in Afghanistan during the war is probably really different from from what it is now. But certainly alcohol was still frowned upon for a lot of people before.
Which is probably healthier,
the Taliban took over. Yeah, sure. But yeah, now it's definitely changed on that front.
Yeah. So you're in your compound. Do you walk through a hallway to go to work, or is there like a courtyard walk?
No, I just come downstairs. So it's okay. I think there's a real, it's a pretty uncommon scenario to sort of be living with your colleagues and living in your office, and there's definitely a challenge of
it's kind of like a dorm in college almost.
Yeah,
and you all have the same classes.
Yeah, you really, and the social life is pretty limited, so you've got to. Yeah, it is like having roommates, but they're also your colleagues, and they're also your only social life. But going down to work, it really is just like down one stairwell. So it's hard first thing in the morning to be like, okay, how do I, a lot of people, if you're commuting to work, you've like got that real separation of where you rest and relax and where's home and office. And though I know saying that a ton of people work from home these days. So actually what I'm saying is probably not an uncommon experience. But yeah, I think we probably all do have that feeling of like you got to have that separation, and it's tricky but honestly, like saying that, I do try to carve out those spaces for myself, which is really important, I think, for everyone. And I still try to exercise. I box. Do
you box in your house, or do you go to a gym?
Well, you can't really go to gyms, but my colleague and I, we would box in there, but I would box in the house. Yeah, there's a bag.
I have a bag in my garage. It's very helpful when you're in a bad mood.
Yeah, it's great. But but I mean, to be honest, when I'm working, when I'm in Afghanistan, I am there to work, and I'm there to do the job. So yeah, there isn't as much of the separation of.
So it's like you're on, and then you maybe go out a week or so.
And then I come home to Santa Fe, and I'm off.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So in the world of misinformation and American media that's so focused on every utterance of the president as opposed to the bigger world, what can we do just to inform ourselves better about the true conditions on the ground, whether Afghanistan or any other country? Like, what sources should I look to learn more and be more educated?
I would say there's a lot of good reporting that's still being done about Afghanistan. It is, I think the main thing is that the spotlight is really not on what's happening in the country because, as you say, we're all pretty focused on the main headlines of the day. So right. I think for me and for what I would say for anyone who's interested in either Afghanistan or just other parts of the world that don't have that spotlight on all the time, it just takes a moment of pause of like, I wonder what's happening in that part of the world, and doing a quick search and going to even your like main news source. There's still going to be stories. So in a lot of ways, I think it's about where we put our attention.
So instead of watching TikTok for an hour, maybe go to the New York Times and Google Afghanistan or Agence France-Presse or Reuters or whatever.
Yeah. Or there's like I said, there is a ton of misinformation out there in the world, but I think there's still a lot of journalists like yourself, like all of our colleagues, who are doing really good work and trying to combat that. And I think it really is just about where we put our attention. If there's scrolling or they're saying, I want to find out about something in particular, and going to your local newspaper or to a national newspaper or an international newspaper, and places where we still are working hard to find out the truth and put it out there as best we can.
I think as an American, this is my political statement, not yours. Our paper, opinion-wise, was against going into the war in Iraq. We didn't think Afghanistan forever was a great idea because, any historian knows that's the place where empires go to die, And I never thought it would be that many years for almost no gain, and then to see the whole thing crumble when we left. I mean, I was happy we left. I just was hoping it would be executed in a manner that wasn't so horrible for our allies there and for the country's reputation, our country's reputation. And I just can't imagine like what a mess we left and what it's like to be for you. You're in that mess now, seeing it recuperate and whatever the country's going to become. And what stories do you look for?
Well, I think one of the great things about being there and actually having, AFP has got a really great team there. I mean, if I do say so myself, but I'm really talking about my Afghan colleagues who I have just such respect for. And the great thing about us being there is that we can cover everything that's happening in the country. Not just a small vignette. And
you're not parachuting in.
Yeah. And, and that means we can write about culture, and also like cricket is absolutely massive in Afghanistan. And so we can cover what's happening for the cricket team and how people are responding to that, and also what's happening sort of globally in reaction to the cricket team. And we can write about, just culture and sort of things that are happening in people's day-to-day lives, as well as the big stories that the international community is paying attention to, which is politics and
the state of women, the role of clerics versus secular governments, etc.
The reaction of the international community to the Taliban and to women and the condition of women in the country, and economic challenges and the
and there are people that were going to leave and had been cleared. Maybe they weren't in Afghanistan proper, but they're Afghan and they are in camps or something. And I guess they're going to stop people leaving.
You mean people who are trying to come to the United States?
Yes.
I think it's still really, having not been looking at it closely for the past couple of weeks, this has changed. This has been a very influx situation, so I couldn't speak to it directly, right. But I know that that's definitely something that people who were keen to come to America all over the world have been struggling with, because we really don't know exactly what's going to happen for them. But it's
influx is a great description of the U.S. right now.
Yeah, and I think it's just there's a lot of uncertainty for Afghans and who are maybe we're waiting for a visa, but not just for them, for people all over the planet.
So what did you do that was the most fun at home before you go back?
Oh, wow. Well, I made sure to have a lot of chili, definitely, and more than a couple margaritas, but most fun. I guess most fun for me has been pretty simple. I have not been doing anything too wild, but just being able to spend some real quality time with my parents and see some old friends is honestly really exciting for me these days. And yeah, just getting to be in a familiar place and feel like I'm home and spend that really quiet time with my parents and reading and just sort of honestly going for long walks.
Yes.
The
sunsets have been awesome.
Sorry, I'm like, I need to have a better, I have not been.
Does Santa Fe does it feel the same, or does it look really different to you? I know we have a lot of apartments and building and things like that.
No, it does feel really the same. And actually, I really value that about coming home to Santa Fe, is that obviously things change always. That is the nature of the world. But there's a constancy that is wonderful. And I also, walking around, it's amazing to see places and like particularly locally owned businesses that have been open for my entire life, and I feel like, and the New Mexican as a great example, that we're just these institutions that have been around for the whole time that I've been here.
Yay!
and I really, as I say, for me, when I'm working, I'm on, and then when I come home,
you chill.
And it's a good place to come home to and chill. But I mean, now that you say that, maybe I should try to get some more excitement in my life in New Mexico. So, any recommendations?
No, I'm not living abroad in an exciting place, but I work like a crazy person, and then I go home. That's what I do, and I've always thought that worked really well. And then when I take off, I take off.
Yeah.
But so I think that's a wise work-life balance.
Yeah, well, I'm working on it, but work in progress. Work in progress, definitely.
Well, safe travels on your way back to Kabul, and we're going to be looking for you. Where can we find your work? So to read it, and I know you're on Twitter, and
Twitter or Blue Sky is a good place to find me. But I mean, in fairness, like I feel like I'm not a traitor to my generation. I'm so bad at posting on social media. But I suppose maybe this will remind me that I probably should post some of the work that we're doing more often.
Yes. Yeah, because everybody needs to read it so we know what's really happening.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yep. Well, have a safe trip home, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Conversations Different, hosted by me, Inez Russell Gomez, editorial page editor for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our weekly episodes would not be possible without your support. We hope you enjoy them and keep listening. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Consider signing up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our podcast is available by visiting our website, santafenewmexican.com/podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez is produced by Matt Dalside and Ernesto Cisneros, published by the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local and independent newspaper owned by Robin Martin.